Hello there, and welcome along to Series 4 and Episode 8 of the Gardener Ben podcast, which is brought to you proudly in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 31 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbiltsroses.com. Now I hope I find you all well and ready for summer to really start. Now obviously just a couple of weeks ago we had a really lovely batch of weather through and temperatures soared to around 30 to 35 degrees for around a week. Since then we've been treated to a huge amount of wind and rain, which has caused a huge amount of destruction in the garden. So now that weather has finally broken, it is time to get out and actually start the big clear up. This has brought about some really large pest and disease problems within the garden, as you can expect, especially when it comes to roses. There's a massive amount of deadheading to do, and sometimes when you've got spoilt and damaged blooms, it is often best to actually say goodbye to the whole flush, removing everything as if it had actually flowered properly and deadhead it away. Now, deadheading is something that there's a huge hot topic on raging on at the internet just at the moment, and as long as this task gets done, it doesn't really quite matter how you go about doing it. Spent flowers should be removed from your plants just as soon as possible. Basically, as soon as a pollinator has visited a flower and actually pollinated it, the hormone levels in the plant change quite quickly and it starts to set seed. What you want to do is you want to enjoy the flower for as long as possible, and just as the petals start to fall and the bloom has actually passed its best, it needs to be removed just as quickly as possible. You can remove it down by simply taking a pair of fruit-nosed pruners or your secateurs to it. Remove either the spent flower just on its own if you have a cluster or floribunda rose, or should you wish to, you can remove it down to between 3, 4 or sometimes 5 leaf nodes, depending on the style of plant and how much growth it's going to produce. Lots of people will tell you need to find a true pair of leaves with this and make sure that it matches adult growth. But realistically, as long as the plant has been deadheaded and that flower stem is removed, that is the most important thing. By doing this, you keep the plant hormone levels high and that flush surging forward. Over a period of time, we should actually get between 3, 4 and sometimes even 5 flushes of flowers during a decent season. So make sure that you're watering and obviously feeding your plants well to give them all the energy that they need. Now, the other thing that's become a huge problem in the garden right now with our change of weather is pest and disease problems. With our nighttime temperatures falling sometimes down to single figures and there being a huge amount of moisture due to the amount of rain that we've had, black spot, mould, mildew and rust have become a real issue in the rose garden. Now, normally I would advise the best thing to do is to avoid this at all costs through proper pruning, proper watering and of course proper mulching. However, with a season like we're experiencing at the moment, it is like fighting an oncoming tide. The best thing to do is, if one of your plants is showing signs of black spot, mould, mildew or rust, is to simply defoliate it. Remove all of the flowers as if you were deadheading, and then remove all of the foliage like you would be if you were doing your autumn or winter pruning on a rose that hadn't dropped its foliage yet. All of this foliage that's affected should be removed. Collect any that has fallen around the ground and to the floor and take it to either the commercial recycling centre or maybe pop it in the incinerator. What you don't want to do is pop this kind of media onto your home compost bin. Unfortunately, this will not reach the right temperature and probably infect plants at another time. So make sure that you remove all of the foliage and dispose of it away from the garden safely. My inbox on Instagram and TikTok is also full with many people being concerned about their roses. The high amount of rain that we've had in the UK over the last couple of weeks has really damaged this first flush of flowers. And the biggest problem that a lot of you are suffering with is balling. This is when a plant actually is marching forward to flowering, and especially a huge problem with roses with a high petal count. When the flowers get wet and the plant starts to open the bloom, unfortunately the outer petals get stuck together, entombing the bloom within it. These can look a little unsightly on your plant, and with a little encouragement, for instance shaking the flower heads or sometimes just manipulating them between your 2 thumbs, you can encourage the flower to open. However, my advice if you're experiencing balling in the garden is to simply remove the damaged flowers as if they had flowered and you had enjoyed them. Simply remove them by deadheading and more flowers will be produced in the coming weeks. It looks as if the growing season of 2026, like many other seasons that have come before it, are going to be incredibly challenging. It looks as if the temperatures are now going to start to rise and we are going to be baked for many months on end. So at least we now have a huge amount of moisture in the soil to fuel a second and third flush of flowers. If you have any questions or queries, you can always send me a message on Instagram, YouTube or TikTok and I'll be more than happy to help you with your questions there. Fresh off the back of our brand new releases at the Chelsea Flower Show 2026, this week I have the absolute pleasure in bringing you a very personal conversation with Dave. Dave sadly lost his mother a year or so ago and decided to pay her tribute by having a rose named after her. The rose, Joan Darwent, was actually launched at the Chelsea Flower Show 2026 by Peter Beals, and then went through an official and very personal naming ceremony at the Norfolk-based Rose Breeders display gardens just a week or so ago. I wanted to catch up with Dave and find out why he decided to name this rose after his mother, and why he was particularly drawn to this astonishingly beautiful variety. Now, I'm yet to actually give you my first impressions of this particular rose. However, I have filmed with it at Chelsea and can confirm it is incredibly pretty. Shallowly cupped and incredibly vigorous, it produces large, rich apricot flowers which are packed full of fragrance. So let's see what Dave has to say about why he chose this particular rose for his late mother, Joan. Well, today on the Gardener Ben podcast, I'm joined by Dave. Dave, I've been following along on Instagram for a long time. You're one of my OG followers, but thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. We're going to talk a little bit about a brand new rose that was launched by Peter Beals at the Chelsea Flower Show and is soon to be going through a naming ceremony at the actual nursery itself. Dave, do you want to tell us a little bit about this rose and how it's associated with yourself?
Yeah, well, it will be obvious to anybody who sees the rose that the name Joan Darwent is clearly about a person rather than
Yes.
an organisation or just a name picked from thin air. So my mother died in 2025, and at the age of 95 and a half, she'd always been one of these people who was involved in lots of things. And yet, despite that, she insisted that she was an absolute nobody, meant nothing to nobody, and didn't want to be remembered, which is not particularly easy to deal with in many ways when she's made herself known in so many different circles. Um, but the long and the short of it was that she particularly stressed that she did not want a tombstone anywhere. She wanted to be cremated and her ashes put in a place where it meant something to her, but you can't possibly have a memorial. And I've got a bit of a problem with that. I don't like cremation to start with, and I certainly don't like not having any kind of marker that a person ever existed.
Hmm.
And obviously, being a bit personal, being it was my mother, I was quite keen to do something that didn't directly contravene her wishes, but did give me a memorial. Well, one of the things Mum's always loved is roses and anything to do with gardening. So the wheels in my head started turning, and I thought, well, I know that there are rose breeders who still offer rose naming programs, uh, and so I got in touch with two or three of them, and I was very pleased that Peter Beals was the one who actually responded positively, because they're a company I've bought much from in the past anyway and know a lot about.
Hmm.
So that's how we ended up with a rose called Joan Darwent. It's my way of having a memorial, if you like, to my mother without directly breaking her express wishes about having a tombstone. Bit sneaky, but does the job.
I think I'm not going to say it's sneaky. I'm going to say it's very tenacious and very laterally thinking of you. I mean, you found your way around it. Having found well, I'm not saying your situation is anything like mine, but having found myself in a difficult situation with siblings with my grandfather's last wishes, I can highly understand your longing and commitment to serving her wishes, but then also needing something for yourself. So this particular
Hmm.
rose, I mean, I've seen it up close and personal, and it excites me greatly. It's very, very pretty. So what drew you to this particular rose? What was it about this rose? I'm assuming you got to choose this from several different options. What was it that captivated your attention?
Um, if I'm honest, it started with the process of elimination to cut out some others that I didn't feel were ideal for the job.
Hmm.
And that left me with probably about, I can't remember now for sure. I think they showed me 12 roses on the day. It might have been 10.
Yeah.
And I very quickly narrowed it down to five
Yeah.
by taking out ones which actually I liked, ones I thought were really gorgeous. But one, for example, was almost a purple colour flower. And Mum was very funny about colours. And one of the colours she didn't much like was purple. So I
Hmm.
thought, well, if it was for me, I'd love that rose. But actually, given it's for Mum, maybe it would be a little bit of wrong to deliberately choose a colour she didn't like.
Yeah.
So I went through
Okay.
that process, and I was
You're
left with
very
a good
good at
rose.
taking you're very good at taking yourself out of this situation, aren't you? You're
Well, I don't know, but I basically got down to five, which I thought was suitable. I'd said to Peter Beals right from square one that I was interested in one that had a strong fragrance
Mhm.
because I love roses the same as Mum did. I grow lots of roses that are, well, some of them are nearly 100 years old in my garden, which was my grandparents' garden, and it's the one Mum grew up in. And Mum had always been very fond of the roses with a strong scent, and we both of us commented on how many modern roses don't have as much scent as they used to. One of the other things I wanted was vigorous growth. Again, because that's what I like in a rose, and also Mum and Dad always liked roses that were very strong and vigorous and prolific. Um, so I got after these five, I eliminated ones which didn't have such a strong scent. Now, actually, I don't have a very good sense of smell, so the ones I eliminated may well still have had a good scent, but I couldn't smell them. And the two I ended up with at the end, one of which is the one we've got, did have a really strong scent, which I could smell with no trouble at all.
Yeah.
Um, and then of the two, I was just looking at them, and quite frankly, I didn't have a clue which one to choose. They were both gorgeous roses. I couldn't see any reason why either of them was inappropriate. But there was something about the variation in the tones of the colour on this one, and also the particularly sort of frilly petals on it. And I just thought, I think that's probably the best of the two. The other one that I was humming and hawing over at the time had beautiful flowers, very very shapely hybrid tea flowers, and in many ways they were just the sort of rose that Mum would have absolutely gone crazy over if she's seen it in a shop or in a well manicured garden or whatever. But this one just had something about the flowers, and I thought I think I like that one most of the two.
Yeah.
So that's how we ended up with it in the end.
Okay, well, you've obviously worked through a good process of elimination because during the setup for Chelsea for Peterbilt's, obviously I was invited up by Peterbilt's to give them a hand to actually set up their stand, which is the first time I've ever had the privilege of actually accessing Chelsea Flower Show on a build day. Gone on press days on several occasions and had a lovely time, and obviously went this year. But I was there to capture media and obviously be very useful and attaching floor to the feet, lots of bits of dog body work. But having got to create quite a lot of media and capture some things, I saw the rose on a trolley and was immediately drawn to its colour and its form and and then its fragrance was which absolutely astonishing. So you've chosen a really, really beautiful variety. So obviously nobody knows really quite what it looks like, although there are pictures out there. So let's just
Mm,
describe it so the listeners that are listening can actually understand it. It's a really, 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 really loosely cupped rose, isn't it? It's got
mm,
a shallow bowl, quite a
yeah,
lot of petals, although it's not overly packed. It's quite loose, so there is a
yeah.
little bit of movement, a little bit of space, but the petal count is medium, and it's a really lovely, rich apricot colour, which
Hmm.
is sort of flecked with bits of apricot and small amounts of peach, and there's small tones of sort of pink there as well, which I haven't seen, but I'm assuming in the actual garden, depending on the actual heat and the light levels, that's going to change. It's either going to be a really nice strong apricot with bits of orange in it, or it's going to blush out into something that's probably a little bit more pale, a little bit more lighter with much more apricot and yellow in it. But the fragrance was an absolute knockout. Now, I'm told by Peter Beals that this rose is very vigorous. It grows away very strongly. It produces lots of flowers. And it is probably going to need some support. It's going to be quite
Mm,
sprawling. It's going to be quite informal in its growth habit. So the suggestion is realistically, it's either given a pot to cascade out of, or it's going to be growing in the garden. You're going to have to give it some support, maybe an obelisk or a wigwam, something just to sort of
Mm.
train up. Or maybe even in future, it might actually turn into more of a short climber for sort of cladding the size of a rose arch, or maybe a low fence or something like that. But it's certainly going to need a little bit of support because the blooms are quite large, to what I remember, measuring probably about 3.5, maybe coming on 4 inches in diameter. They're really quite large indeed. So yeah, but the fragrance was absolute knockout. So well done for choosing
Yeah.
that. It was very, very nice rose indeed. So of all the roses that I've seen, I mean, I've seen a lot of roses and I continue to see a lot of roses. So for me to pick out one out of, I think the total figure was 1,900 plants that Peter Beals took to their stand. For that to stand out and for me to home in on it, yeah, a very, very
Mm.
good rose indeed.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad you like it, and thanks for that.
Well, it'll
It's
be, sorry, carry on.
I say it's interesting that Beals mentioned that it might need some support, and I know you did as well in your little introduction into it on Instagram from Chelsea. I don't remember them mentioning that at the point I was choosing it, but actually by chance, that's an extra point in its favour because one of the things that Mum always liked, one of the things that I really like about our gardens, we've always had rustic pergolas covered in roses.
Hmm.
They don't seem very fashionable these days. At least they're not up here in the north of England. And trying to buy decent wood to make replacement parts for rustic pergolas is a nightmare because everything is machine rounded poles with treatment on them and horrible colours till they've weathered. But I still have a rustic pergola in my garden. It's still exactly the same shape as it was when my grandfather put it there in 1929 because he cast big concrete sockets for all the uprights. So every time I have to replace the wood, I know it's going in the right place. And so actually finding this rose is one that's going to want some support, and as you say, might be a short climber. That's an extra bonus as far as I'm concerned because it will work in the sort of places that our family have always liked to grow our roses in.
Wonderful. That's nice to hear. It will be winging its way. I'm actually collecting it directly from Peter Beals in about 2 weeks' time
Uh-huh.
during their Rose Festival. I'm bringing their new collection down here for me to start my process with. Obviously, we've had an introduction at Chelsea. I managed to film that at Chelsea, and then it'll have its first impressions, which is another little introduction to it. It'll have that over the next couple of 3 weeks, maybe the next month or so, and then a full personal growing review from myself in about a year's time. But
Oh,
would you mind if can we talk a little bit about your mum? Now, obviously, she was a
oh,
keen gardener and left instructions behind that she didn't want things like
yes.
a gravestone or some sort of memorial. What was your mum like?
Uh, Feisty might be the most appropriate word. It's not necessarily the most complimentary one, but
Well,
um,
yeah, I'm
she,
liking her so far. Carry on.
yeah, um, she was absolutely steadfast in her beliefs. She was really, really strong-willed and had very, very rigid beliefs about a great many things. And at times, let's be honest, at times that's made life quite challenging, both for her and for those around her,
Hmm.
especially when the way the modern world goes doesn't always fit with those things. But above all else, she was really passionate about preserving things, be that nature, gardening, flowers, and so on. And in the introduction to the rose that I wrote for Beale's catalogue, I kind of noted that she was introduced to gardening at a very, very young age. Um, and she was born on the day of the Wall Street crash, 24th of October, 1929. So she grew up in a household where there was almost no money because her father, my grandfather, made silver cutlery. And of course, in the middle of a Great Depression, there's not much market for silver cutlery. And in those
No.
days, you only got paid for what you made. So if no one's buying it, you're not making it, you don't get paid. So Mum's introduction to gardening was when the family were having to grow as much as they possibly could in the way of food because there wasn't anything else around. And from a very early age, Mum obviously got attached to the idea of rescuing things because she often used to talk about the fact that her parents would give her bits of plants that looked like they weren't going to make it, whether it was an odd beetroot or whatever it was. And Mum would look after it minutely until whatever it was did grow. And she carried on doing the same all her life, particularly with roses. Um, So yeah, she was passionate about gardening. She was passionate about preserving nature, about looking after things. She always used to say that she looked out for the underdog, and I think that was certainly true, and particularly with, as I say, sickly plants and so on. But as her life went on, she ended up, and frankly, I didn't know this until after she died because I'd never tried to work it out. But she ended up being a member of more than 40 different organisations. And the one thing they all had in common was they got something to do with preserving stuff, whether it was preserving buildings, getting buildings listed, gardens, looking after gardens, churches, cathedrals, you name it, anything to do with preserving stuff, she was involved in it, which aligned very, very well with her very strong beliefs, which were all about you make, do, amend, you reuse things, not replace them, you don't pull things down and build a new one, you make the old one fit, etc. So I think if I had to characterize it, really, that would be the best way to do it. Say that she was always out there on a mission to save things and look after things.
Which
But yes, she was.
I suppose a lot of people would actually see as a sort of a resistance to change. But from
Mm,
the description you've just made of her, that's more of a cultural thing. Very much like my granddad. He was actually born not too distant similar time. He was born in 1926, and
mhm,
he again liked to reuse, mend, and put up with bits and pieces. And it wasn't the fact he didn't have any money towards the end of his life. He
mm.
had plenty of money. It was for him, it was a cultural thing. He
Yes.
was very used to, and we used to tell him to Grandad, go and buy a new mattress, or Grandad, buy new clothes, or spend it on whatever you want. He didn't feel comfortable doing that at
Yeah.
all. It just wasn't him. Until to the very end. My granddad retired in 1981, and he passed away about 6 years ago. He was still wearing uniform that he'd been issued from the National
Yeah.
Railway with, and he had sources of brand new uniforms still unopened in the packets,
Mm.
which he might have been issued with, I don't know, in the 70s, maybe in the early 80s. But he had packets of uniform unopened, which he would, oh, I need a new shirt. He'd go to the cupboard, he'd get a new shirt out. He was still wearing trousers that he was issued, and to him, that was normal. That was exactly the
Yeah.
way he was, and that was the way he was comfortable. And when it came to sort of laying him to rest again, most people would have wanted to put him in a smart suit. And we didn't do that because that just wasn't him. He wouldn't have felt.
Yeah.
Actually, how bizarre is this? The audience can't see because they're listening. I'm actually wearing his rugby shirt because
Excellent.
that culture has come
Yes.
down to me. And I'm not saying that I can't spend
Yeah.
money and I won't spend money, because I can and I will. But we opened the garden to the public here at the weekend, and one of the overwhelming things that came back from people is how they like my reuse and repurposing of things
Yeah.
about the garden. And a lot of that is I just see so much value and so much beauty in old things that
Yes.
actually, whether they were designed for what I use them for or not, if they were going in the bin or somebody else doesn't want them, it's like, "Ooh, what can I do with that?" So yeah, by the sounds of things, most people would think that your mum would resist change, but she was actually very much a preserver. She saw the history, she saw the heritage, she saw the worth in things that a lot of people nowadays might turn their back on.
Mm.
Buildings, for instance, that you
Mhm.
know aren't, somebody dies and, oh, well, we'll turn that into a block of flats. Well, actually, no. Do we have to take the whole building down? Can we not leave the
Yeah.
facade?
Yeah.
Can we not repurpose it? Can we not rework the space inside? So by the sounds of things, this is a very much a cultural thing for her, not just a resistance to change.
Absolutely. Clearly, your family background is quite similar to mine from what you said about your granddad. A lot of it rings very true. And yes, it is a cultural thing. And, she found after many, many years of feeling quite fed up, I think, of the world around her saying exactly what you just said, that she was resistant to change. And oh, come on, it's time you sort of got with the modern stuff. But then she did start to find lots of organisations. In fact, she was founding member of quite a lot of organisations like the 20th Century Society, where like-minded people all wanted to do the same thing. So yeah, she flourished, to use the flower analogy, in I suppose mid to later life, as she found all these organisations full of kindred spirits. But yeah, she looked after things as well, which by the sounds of it, your granddad did. One of the things I put in the notes at the funeral, which raised a wry smile from some people, but she refused point blank to have any mod cons. We never had a washing machine until 1983, and the one that she had in 1983 is still here and still working now. She wouldn't get rid of things if they were working. And she made sure they worked by looking after them, and then she
This
expected
this
other people to do the same.
this this story is sounding very familiar because my grandfather had again he had a wash machine and it was a lot younger than your mum's because he actually he had a twin tub. He had a twin tub until I don't know, probably only about 15 years ago, and it
Mm.
packed up. And I personally took him out to buy a washing machine, and I actually paid for it because he basically was refusing to purchase one and was going to hand wash his clothes. And it's like, granted, you're not going to do this, but he would
Yeah.
only wash once a week. And obviously,
Mm.
I don't know what you do in your house, but when we have a load of washing. Obviously, sometimes I might get really dirty from in the garden or I might get covered in something. Well, the wash goes on when it needs to go on.
Mm.
Granddad wouldn't do that. Granddad would only put the wash on. He would wash on a Monday and he made sure he had 8 vests, 8 pairs of pants, 8 pairs of socks, and of
Mm.
shirts, and that was him. That was his entire wardrobe. So yeah, when wash
Mm.
day came round on a Monday, he would wash everything. And
Yes.
then
Yeah.
he just had one of everything left. So if wash day didn't happen, he was in a lot of trouble. But yeah, he yeah, and he would unplug that bloody excuse my language, that bloody wash machine because he was terrified it was going to take over his life. He unplugged the wash machine and completely disconnected it from the mains. But so for
Yeah.
6 days it would stand there completely unplugged.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
fear of it sort of taking over the kitchen or something. So, yeah, your mum is sounding very much like my granddad.
I think my mum and your granddad must be distant relations somewhere because wash day was always Monday, ironing day was a Tuesday, and that never shifted from the day that mum was married till the day that she died. And yes, when the washing machine wasn't in use on a Monday, the plug was taken out and the taps were turned off at the wall.
Oh, I love her. So, tell you, would you mind telling us a little bit about her garden? Because you mentioned that she grew vegetables and that was
Mm.
something that she grew up doing, but also had a keen passion for roses. What was because you're at your mum's house now, aren't you?
I am at mum's house at the moment, yes. So the garden that mum grew up in is at my house where I now live, which was my grandparents' house, and then I went to live there. And I opened my garden for the NGS. And one of the things that people say when they come around is, "Oh, it's just like going back in time." Well, it would be because I've made it my mission to keep it pretty much like it was laid out in the 1920s,
You so
including the
you've you
rustic rose art
so,
and so
you,
on.
so you've taken on a little bit of your mum's sort of heritage and productions
Absolutely.
protection streak, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But when Mum got married in 1956 and moved to a new home, which was then a newly built home with no garden at all, she and Dad, first of all, they chose the house they did because it's at the top of a cul-de-sac with a wedge-shaped garden. So at the front, it doesn't look like there's much garden at all. At the back, it's absolutely massive because it just gets bigger and bigger as you go further down the garden. More than 3 times bigger than the garden she grew up with. And right from day one, they set this garden out with an endless set of weaving grass paths going all around it and huge flower beds in between them. It's become a bit of a woodland garden as years have gone on because it backs onto a cemetery and an orchard. Um, or it was an orchard, it's been built on now. And we've put quite a few trees in ourselves. And given that they lived here from 1956 and it's now 2026, that's 70 years for some of those trees to grow, like the
Hmm.
magnificent oak tree in the garden. But right from day one, they laid it out with endless different amounts of flowering plants. So in the early years, mum and dad did very much the same things that mum's parents had done, my grandparents, and they grew rows of sweet peas and chrysanthemums and dahlias for show. Very neat regimented ranks, going out there every day, disbudding and tying up the sweet peas, getting massive amounts of blooms off them. And right from day one, there was a pretty substantial rose bed here and a rustic pergola. Guess what? No surprises there. Um, so we still have in the garden now American pillar ramblers that are, well, I'm looking out of the window now. They're flowering out of the top of a holly tree, which must be at least 40 feet tall now. And they've still
Okay.
got the American pillars going up it and flowering in great cascades out of it.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, the garden was it was a labour of love, as my grandparents had been, and until my father died, which sadly is about 30 years ago now. when there were the two of them doing it, it was absolutely immaculate all the time. Obviously, Mum on her own in the last 30 years and getting older, she's been able to do a bit less than she did at one time. But also, and this goes back to the resistance to change, or is it preservation? There's things like this wonderful, magnificent oak tree. It's now 70 years old, and it really is a magnificent, beautiful, round oak tree. But of course, you don't get a 70-year-old oak tree without having a lot of shade underneath it. So
No.
there's now chunks of this garden which are no longer beautifully manicured and full of beds of freshly planted bedding each year or whatever. They're now full of things like collection of Weigela and mock orange and things like that, which are happy to grow along with the oak tree rather than fight for the light underneath it.
Yeah.
So it's morphed over the years. And it's hardly surprising because, again, aligning with Mum's, looking after nature and all the preservation side of things. Well, not only did she not want to cut down things like the oak tree, but she was also fantastically enthusiastic about the wildlife that's come to live underneath it and in it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Lovely.
yeah.
So you, by the sounds of things, I hate to say this, but by the sounds of things, you've got a decision to make. That I'm assuming you're not going to be keeping this house. You're going to have to sell it at some point. So
Yeah. Sadly, it will ultimately have to be sold, and we can only hope it gets sold to someone who's keen on gardens, because you can't get a much bigger garden than this, and by modern standards, it's almost like an estate. I mean, it isn't an estate. There's no two ways about it. It's not. But when you look at what you get with a modern house, this garden must be at the very least 11 times bigger than you get with most modern houses.
okay, so it's a fairly decent chunk then. It's
Absolutely, yeah.
very nice. Oh, well, thank you very much for sharing a little bit about your mum and her garden, because it's realistically, I think the overwhelming thing that you take away once you're involved in the in the rose world in any way, shape, or form is that so many people are transported in time, and it's normally the fragrance of a rose, which is obviously why you've chosen the rose you did in honor of your mum, because of its fragrance initially. It's normally the fragrance which transports people to another space and time, and starts stirring emotions and certainly memories. And for myself, the story is very, very similar. Obviously, you're aware that at the moment I'm writing a book that's out in November 2027. And one of the large, and people say, well, what got you? Obviously, having had the garden open here and to the public over the weekend, people want to know the backstory about how I came to do what I do and why I do what I do. One of the largest playing factors is the fact that my nan, actually, on the other side, my nan was a king gardener. She loved roses, and one of my first and earliest memories of her, and one of my first complete memories, is actually turning up at their house in the car, all three of us packed into the back seats of my mum and dad's car. My nan was out on the drive with her suede gloves, with a wooden trug, cutting roses for the house. And she would do that quite regularly. She had a row of standard roses along the drive, and she would go out and she would obviously tend them and deadhead them. But the idea of those is she would cut several blooms for the house and take those into the house. And there was an oval table in the foyer of the bungalow they lived in. Actually, her portrait hung above it. And there was always a silver vase with a few roses there on the table. Now, funny enough, that painting now resides in my dining room, and it's here at North Lodge. And I took several people in to show over the weekend. I know you're not supposed to let people into your house when you do these things, but you can't help it when you're emotionally involved. I took several people into the house and showed them that oil painting of my nan, and there you go. That's why I do what I do, and people are always very connected to the story. So the rose and its story is very, really interesting, and I really want to thank you very much for sharing it with the world. You've done a wonderful job of, I mean, obviously the breeders at Peterbilt's created the rose, so they've taken 10, 12 years to generate it, but you've chosen it incredibly well, and the story behind it is lovely. So the rose is now available to pre-order for bare root season, so if anybody is interested and they're listening along, they can get hold of it. Can't get hold of it in flower form. It's sold out in flower form, but it is available as a bare root rose for the autumn and winter. And if they're interested, they obviously can see my thoughts and impressions. I should be sharing much, much more about it, because it's certainly captivated my attention. And for it to stand out, say, in 1900 roses, it has to be exceptionally good and have the qualities that, again, draws me as a rose lover to it. So well done for choosing that. And thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today and sharing the backstory of your mum and, of course, the rose with us all.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, and there's going to be a naming day, isn't there? Have you a date for that just at the moment, or is that
Yes,
something that's
yeah,
still up and coming?
no, that's this coming Saturday at Peter Beale's. So there's 10 of us off down to Peter Beale's on Saturday.
Okay.
Mostly not family members, just either people who knew Mum or people who've known me,
Hmm.
or both. But yeah, Saturday this week, Saturday the 6th of June, we have the naming day at Beale's, and then well, hopefully after that it will be visible to many more people, because I believe it will go live on their website then, as well as the fact it's in their catalogue already.
Yes, well, wonderful. Well, I hope you enjoy that little celebration with your family, friends, and close people that are close to you and that knew yourself, that know yourself and know your mum. So I hope you enjoy that event, and I think you've been very, very, very good in commemorating your mum and marking her life without, I say, as you said, breaking her wishes or overstepping the mark. So hopefully that shows. Well, I hope that shows your tenacity of spirit as well as well as hers.
Yes, it would, if Mum was here to say it, attract um, a comment made in a quite disapproving tone of, "You've always been strong-willed." So,
He wouldn't have you any other way.
well, whether she'd have chosen a different way or not, I don't know, but it's what she got.
Well, I think she should be very grateful for what she's got. You've done a wonderful thing, Dave. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. I will see you. I will see you soon, and I look forward to sharing much more about the rose, which is obviously named after your mum, which is called Joan Derwent. They'll be seeing lots and lots of that on my channels over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time. I'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
It sounds like Dave's late mother Joan and my late grandfather Don would have really got on very well together indeed. A strong sense of make do and mend, and always keeping things for another time and preserving things for the future, ran strongly through both of their personalities. Dave really has chosen a beautiful rose in honour of his late mother, and I hope that you all have it in your gardens very soon. It is now available for pre-order bare root from Peterbilt's Roses, so you can head over to their website and order it so you have it in your garden for this time next year. Next week, the Gardener Ben podcast is bringing you a very special episode, actually not recorded by myself, but actually by my husband Mark. Now, as many of you will remember, and quite a few of you actually visited yourselves, the garden was opened here at North Lodge to the public, and we welcomed several hundred of you through the gates over the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Mark thought it would be a really lovely idea to create a podcast episode about the open garden and capture some of your opinions as you actually left the garden space. So next week, I'm bringing you a very special episode, complete with all of those sound bites recorded by Mark, but actually many of your opinions of the actual garden and what you were taking home to try and incorporate into your own growing spaces. So catch us next week for that particular episode. Now, if you're sat listening to your podcast at home or whilst driving, you're thinking, Ben, I have absolutely no idea what your garden actually looks like. Why don't you head over to my YouTube channel and take a look at the Garden Tours playlist? Every time I do a garden tour here at North Lodge and walk around the garden, I always place it onto a playlist so you can have a watch of it at any time, giving you a much more larger three-dimensional impression of what the garden is and what it looks like here at North Lodge. So make sure that you head across to my YouTube channel where I use the name _Gardener Ben and have a look at the Garden Tours playlist now. As we thunder towards the third week of June and the weekend of the 20th and 21st of June as we celebrate Father's Day, it is actually the Peterbilt's Festival of Roses at Attleborough, Norfolk, taking place at the English Rose Breeders Display Gardens and Nursery. This is a free event with fun for all of the family. There's over 2 acres of roses on display at their display garden, and it also contains some of the larger structures they've actually used in their Chelsea Flower Show and Hampton Court Palace Flower Show displays over the last 10 years. There will be fun for all the family, workshops and talks over the weekend, and it's free to get in. So if you're in the Norfolk area and you're looking for something fun, relaxing and incredibly beautiful to do head over to Attleborough, where I'll see you all there. The Gardener Ben podcast is brought to you proudly in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 31 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbealsroses.com and make sure that you're following along on Instagram and TikTok. Until next week, happy gardening.